What if your greatest strength wasn't in your voice, but in your silence? What if your power came not from fighting back, but from refusing to break? This isn't just philosophy. This is the true story of a man who was born a slave, beaten, humiliated, silenced, and yet he became one of the most powerful minds in history, without status, without revenge, without a sword. This is the story of Epictetus, the warrior who never struck back, but won the deepest battle of all, the war for the human soul. There's a silent war going on right now, not on battlefields, but inside bedrooms, inside broken minds, inside anxious hearts. You can feel it, the constant tension, the noise, the pressure to succeed, the fear of not being enough, the past screaming in your head, the future tightening your chest, and sometimes you don't even know what you're fighting anymore. You're just exhausted, burned out, numb. This is not weakness. This is the world we've built. A world where peace feels like a myth, and your mind becomes your enemy. But thousands of years ago, there was a man who lost everything. His body was owned, his freedom stolen, his dignity crushed, and yet he smiled. Not because life was easy, but because he found a way to win a war nobody saw. His name was Epictetus, a slave turned sage, a man who rewired pain into power and gave the world a quiet map for surviving hell and coming out whole. This is not a history lesson. This is a message for the part of you that's tired of pretending, the part that needs to heal, to rise, to breathe again. Let's begin. Epictetus was born into slavery, not metaphorically, literally, around 55 AD in the Roman Empire. He was owned by a rich, powerful man named Epaphroditus, a secretary to the Emperor Nero. Yes, that Nero, the one who burned cities and killed his own mother. Life under Epaphroditus wasn't just harsh, it was inhumane. According to ancient sources, Epictetus was beaten so badly as a boy, his leg was permanently crippled. Some say it was twisted. Some say it was broken and left untreated. But one thing was certain, pain became his first language. Imagine being a child, hurt, powerless, told when to eat, told when to sleep, told when to speak or not speak at all. No choices, no freedom, no voice. But something strange happened. Epictetus didn't grow bitter. He didn't lash out. He didn't plot revenge. Instead, he watched, he listened, he asked questions. He learned something most of us never do. We are disturbed not by the things that happen to us, but by our thoughts about them. That was one of his later teachings, but it was forged right here, in the silence of his suffering. While the world tried to crush him from the outside, he began building something unbreakable on the inside, a fortress of the mind. In the heart of Rome, among marble halls, violent politics, and opulent power, Epictetus, the crippled slave, did something no one expected. He began to study. His master Epaphroditus allowed him to attend the lectures of a philosopher named Musonius Rufus, a bold and brilliant teacher of Stoicism. Now imagine this. You're a slave. Your body is not your own. You walk with pain, and yet you sit beside free men, learning how to live as if you were never in chains. That's what Stoicism taught him. Not just how to survive suffering, but how to own it. No man is free who is not master of himself. Epictetus, he didn't just hear those words. He absorbed them, breathed them in like medicine. While others craved wealth, he studied character. While others fought for power, he trained his thoughts. And while others lost their minds to ego, he became silent, strong, untouchable, not physically, but internally. He began to understand something most people never do, that true freedom has nothing to do with chains and everything to do with control of your mind, your reactions, your soul. Epictetus realized they could beat his body, but they could not touch the space inside him where peace lived. And that realization became his rebellion. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to pick up a sword. He just had to master what no one could steal, his response. This is how a slave became a philosopher. Not because he escaped, but because he transformed while still in chains. That's what Stoicism is. It's not a denial of pain. It's the art of rising above it without needing to be rescued first. Epictetus eventually earned his physical freedom, but by the time he was released, he had already become the freest man in Rome. He moved to a small town called Nicopolis and opened a humble school. There were no grand statues, no titles, no fame, just a man who had been through hell and came back with a lantern for the rest of us. He taught that freedom wasn't in possessions, not in power, not in controlling others, but in controlling yourself. Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Epictetus. Let that sink in. We chase so much: approval, likes, status, money, validation, and the more we chase them, the more enslaved we feel. Epictetus flipped the script. He said, you don't become free by changing your life. You become free by changing your lens. He wasn't speaking as a guru from a mountain. He was speaking as a man who once slept on a floor, with scars that still ached, with memories that still haunted him, but with a mind that could no longer be broken. And that's the part that matters most, because freedom isn't when the pain ends. It's when the pain loses its power over you. If the body is the battlefield, the mind is the command center. And for Epictetus, that was the only place that mattered. He believed that the key to surviving anything, heartbreak, rejection, failure, even torture, was not in escaping it, but in preparing your mind before it happened. It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters, Epictetus. He taught discipline, not the kind we think of today, punishments, routines, strict checklists, but the kind that sharpens your spirit like a blade. Every morning, every night, every moment in between, you were to watch your thoughts, guard them, question them, shape them. He would tell his students, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. That sounds simple, but it's war. Because we live in a world where everything fights for your mind. Comment section, rejection letter, the silence of someone who stopped caring, job you didn't get, past you can't outrun. These are mental bullets. Epictetus knew this long before psychology put names to it, so he created a mental armor, a practice of detachment. Not detachment from people, but from outcomes. Don't control what they say. You don't control what the world takes. Only control how you respond. That's the Stoic code. For a man who had every reason to hate the world, Epictetus chose peace, not because he was soft, but because he had built mental muscles no one could see. Daily practice, a life on purpose. His life was simple. No wealth, no big house. He didn't even write his own books. His student Arrian recorded his teachings. But Epictetus had rituals. Reflect every morning on what you can control. Anticipate hardships. Prepare the mind in advance. Accept what comes without resistance. End the day in reflection. What did I do well? What needs growth? No drama, no distractions. Just a man building clarity, one thought at a time. This is what we lack today. We scroll, we compare, we react, but we rarely reflect. Epictetus flipped that cycle. He reacted less and reflected more. And that's what made him powerful. Not because his world changed, but because his mind did. We often hear the phrase, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. But most people, they just survive. They don't grow, they don't transform. But Epictetus, he didn't just endure pain, he used it. Every scar, every memory of humiliation, every moment he was treated like less than human, entities, he turned into wisdom, compassion, clarity. That's the difference. Pain alone doesn't make you wise. Pain understood does. Pain embraced does. Difficulties show what men are. Therefore, when trouble comes, think of yourself as a wrestler whom God has matched with a tough young opponent. Epictetus, he saw suffering not as a punishment, but as training, a test, a forge, a fire that reveals your form. He used a metaphor often. Life is like a game of dice. You don't choose the number you roll, but you choose how to play your hand. Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it actually will. Then your life will flow well. In modern words, don't waste your life being angry at the cards you were dealt. Learn to play them like a master. That was Epictetus. He didn't cry out, "Why me?" He asked, now that this is mine, what will I do with it? And that mindset, that shift, is how suffering becomes strength, a gift in the pain. This may sound strange, but Epictetus saw his suffering as a gift. Yes, a gift, because without it, he might have been just another man in the crowd, chasing the world, trying to please everyone, running from himself. The pain stopped him, forced him to listen, forced him to go inward. And inside that silence, he found peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Now ask yourself, what if the thing you're running from is the very thing that could set you free? That heartbreak, that betrayal, that illness, that silence? Could it be that it's not breaking you, but building you? Epictetus would say, yes. There's a kind of strength we rarely talk about. Not the kind that crushes enemies, not the kind that wins debates or takes the spotlight, but the strength to sit in silence and not fall apart, the power to be alone and not feel empty. That was Epictetus's ultimate weapon. Stillness. Not laziness, not apathy, but that deep, grounded calm that comes from knowing no one can take what's inside you. Freedom is the right use of reason to accept what cannot be changed, to act where we can, and to never let the noise of the world drown the clarity of the soul. Epictetus, he didn't need revenge, he didn't need applause, he didn't even need to be remembered, because Epictetus didn't want a legacy, he wanted liberation. And that's what he found in stillness. Stillness is the real revolution. Imagine it. The empire around him was obsessed with expansion. More land, more power, more glory. But Epictetus expanded inward. While emperors were chasing thrones, he was sitting in a quiet room, teaching young men how to conquer themselves. This wasn't passivity. This was rebellion. In a world that demands your attention, stillness is resistance. In a culture that says, react, stillness says, wait. In a time that glorifies outrage and urgency, stillness whispers, you don't have to lose yourself in this storm. Stillness isn't about standing still. It's about being unmoved, even when everything else is shaking. It's not escape, it's anchoring, and it changes everything. Why this matters more than ever today: most people aren't beaten with whips. We're beaten with noise, with expectations, with pressure to always be on, always proving, always chasing. But the damage is the same: fractured minds, lost identities, emotional exhaustion. That's why Epictetus isn't just ancient history. He's a lifeline, because his message cuts through centuries. You are not what happens to you. You are what you choose to become in response to it. You may not be in chains, but maybe you feel trapped. Trapped in a job that drains you. Trapped in expectations you never agreed to. Trapped in a body that doesn't feel like home. Trapped in your own head, and maybe no one sees it. Maybe you smile, you post, you nod politely at conversations, but inside you're exhausted. You don't want to win. You just want to feel free. That's why the story of Epictetus matters now, because he teaches us this. Freedom is not a place, it's a perspective. Peace is not out there, it's within. And healing doesn't come from changing the world, but from reclaiming yourself. We live in a time obsessed with expression, but sometimes the strongest thing you can do is to be still, to not react, to not explain, to not beg to be understood. Sometimes the quietest resistance is the most powerful one. Imagine this: a crippled ex-slave sits in a dusty room, no throne, no wealth, just students, listening, and he says, "No man is free who is not master of himself, not master of others, not master of outcomes, but of yourself." And suddenly, everything shifts. You realize you've been looking for power in all the wrong places. Not in control, not in revenge, not in being seen, but in knowing you can feel pain and not be destroyed by it. You can lose things and still be whole. You can be alone and not be empty. This is the rebirth. This is the return to yourself. This is where the war ends. Not because you won it, but because you stopped needing to fight. So what now? Maybe you're not ready to change the world. That's okay. Start smaller. Change how you see it, Epictetus would say. Wake up each day and ask, what can I control? Let go of the rest. Prepare your mind before the chaos begins. Choose silence over panic. Respond instead of react. And above all, remember who you are. Not what the world told you, not what the pain tried to convince you, but what you are when all of that is stripped away. You are not broken. You are becoming, and that is enough. If this message struck something deep inside you, don't just scroll. Pause, reflect, reclaim. Tell us in the comments, what pain are you learning to turn into power? Your story might be the spark someone else is waiting for. And if you're ready to keep walking this path, join this movement of silent warriors. Like, subscribe, not because it's a trend, but because we're building something ancient, something holy, something true.